Hello, friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media. Peace is impossible. Europe is to blame. How Russian TV repackages war and negotiations. In a recent episode of the program 60 Minutes, Olga Skabeeva and her guests demonstrate a technique that has become common on Russian television, reframing the war so that the aggressor appears ready for peace, and Europe appears to be the main obstacle to its advance won. Opening frame: Russia wants peace, but they won't give it Donbas. The segment begins with a quote from US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In this television universe, he's the head of the State Department. He states the obvious. Russia declares that it wants to keep the remaining part of the Donetsk region, and Ukraine cannot agree to this. Then comes a significant substitution. Rubio: Moscow is making demands that Kyiv cannot accept. Skabeeva immediately translates this into Putin, having failed to obtain consent to hand over Donbas diplomatically, will retake it by force. In other words, Russian military pressure is presented as a natural consequence of Ukraine's stubbornness, not as a continuation of full-scale aggression. This is an important propaganda trick. The starting point is not the invasion itself, but Moscow's fair demands, which are supposedly being ignored. 2. Ukraine as an exhausted victim dependent on the US. Then the Ukrainian envoy to the G7 summit appears on camera. He is quoted in such a way as to create the impression that Kyiv no longer relies on its own army, but is merely asking Washington for help surviving the winter and increasing the cost of war for Putin. This builds a dual narrative. One, Ukraine is energy depleted and lives without power for most of the day. 2. It is completely dependent on American sanctions and aid. Why Ukraine found itself in this situation, Russian strikes on the energy grid, destruction of infrastructure, is not discussed. Blame for the population's suffering is not articulated. Instead, the emphasis is on Kyiv's poor governance, dependence, and inefficiency. American social media is exploding with 2 photographs, purportedly taken by accident last week. A B-52 strategic bomber carrying a prototype of the latest LRSO cruise missile, the Utechka leak nuclear-capable Burevestnik Storm missile, is clearly the Pentagon's response to the Russian Burevestnik Storm missile tests.